Kita Jaga.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Greetings and welcome to the Perfect Balance Trodclass. Once again, we set out on a journey to explore the US conflict and its impact on Africa and the global south. We want to explore what happened in the Middle East. You know, it really stayed in the Middle East. And this is another reasoning with the perfect balance trad class. And we want to take a deeper look on the implication of the current war, and how Africa and the global south economy and the economic consequences of some of these issues. So we want to look at the rising energy price and the economic pressure it have on these economy. We're going to talk about how the trade and supply route disruption might impact them. We're going to look at food security and oil producers in Africa versus importers, because you have some country in Africa that produce oil, but even though they produce a lot of petroleum products, they still have to import them. And we want to look at how it will affect their currency and the pressure that it will put on their debt, and what we can learn from this from a Pan-African perspective, because that's what the perfect balance trad class is all about. And we'll also look to see if we can find some solution and a way forward, how Africa can reinvent themselves and take advantage of the situation to develop stability within the region. Today, we have with us Bingi,
Greetings, give thanks for life.
Okavango, and
Yeah.
Ayaga. Yeah, man, give thanks. For some reason, Dada cannot make it today, and him send him wishes and regard to the trad class. We are fully in effect, not change at the perfect balance trad class. What do you them a deal with Rasta?
Yeah, I give thanks, man. Watch what go on in the world. You know what I mean? The conflict, them, all the issues, them. But while we are watch them things, we know say we still have life. And life still go on, and the earth is still beautiful, you know what I mean? Much of what them want for make it seem like it's still beautiful, and we're still there. I did the right thing.
Give thanks to that. Give thanks to that. Bingy.
Yeah, I just watching the run-ins, but give thanks for life. Um, as we sit here today, we know people are dying senselessly, right? Because man's inhumanity, right? We see all goes on as before. But we give thanks for being here, being able to participate, right? But we also give thanks for having the ability to reason about what's happening in the world, the injustices, the cruelty, but even more so, how it affects African people directly. More than anything else, when we see these conflicts going on around the earth, how it affects African people, because they're the ones who ultimately pay the price all the time. So yeah,
This is one of the most profound and impactful issue that we will find happening around. And every time there's a conflict, every time these things happen, Africa feels the brunt of it because our society, our economy, our industry rely on a lot of these powers. We get our fuel, we get our food, our daily supplies is coming from out of the country because we're not building this capacity and we're not adding value to the things that we have in abundance on the continent. So we end up paying a bigger price than most people, and the shock and the impact is felt even more so than African people. One of the first things we want to look at emanating out of the conflict. We know the Strait of Hormuz control 20% of the world's petroleum export. And that is a significant number. That's 1/5. Not only Africa, this will affect. This will affect countries in the global south, even European countries.
The whole world.
Because a lot of their industries rely on these things. What type of pressure, what type of impact do you think this will have on the African economy?
Go on, Bengi, go on.
No, go on.
Yeah, I'm just brainstorming and thinking about it. How would this affect Africa? And for sure it affect Africa because it's oil. You need oil to oil run the world economy, right? The world economy is run by oil. You know what I mean? But I'm looking at it and I'm not sure if it will affect Africa the way it will affect the rest of the world. The extent I'm talking about. Because 600 million people in Africa doesn't have electricity. And when you go the sub-Sahara, the percentage is even more. You know what I mean? I think it's like 70% of the sub-Sahara doesn't have electricity. You know what I mean? So with the oil, I'm not sure. It can have some effect. You know what I mean? But I don't think it would affect Africa as it would affect other countries. You know what I mean? Maybe North Africa, because North Africa is the electricity is better there. But sub-Saharan Africa, I'm not sure the effect on the people. I'm talking about the people, because over 600 million people doesn't have electricity.
But you're saying that just based on oil or the conflict that's going on?
So because of the conflict, we're gonna have a high shortage.
Oil, right? Yeah.
Shortage,
so you're saying it's not gonna affect Africa, but I think it's gonna affect.
It's gonna affect them, but not in the extent that because they didn't have.
I think it might be worse for Africa, and I'll tell you why. Because you're gonna have an economic strain. One, just based on oil prices being higher. That means if oil prices are higher, the citizenry, they're the ones going to be paying. Everything else is going to be higher because now you're talking about logistics. You're talking about transportation. You're talking about how goods get to your country. We're talking about currency devaluation too, within all of this, right? We're talking about humanitarian impact. I think for Africa, it's going to be worse than everybody else. And the reason why is developing countries. And when we talk about the global south, for example, and Africa is part of the global south, it's a socio-economic designation too, right? Because it has these countries like Australia and them who in the global south, but they belong to the global north. So we see that difference, we see that socio-economic thing happening, right? So it's developing countries who really are the global south, right? For African people in Africa, they're gonna feel it. Everything they do right now, because they're already economically challenged, is gonna increase. Because think about it, even shipping now have to go a different route. It means that ships are taking a longer route to bring products as well.
Which is what bring up the high prices.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about logistics. So the effect, I think the effect on developing countries, the global south especially, is going to be hard. They're gonna feel it. The ordinary man, the regular man, hard working man, he's gonna feel it
But
everywhere
Bingy,
he
what I'm
goes.
saying, right? If you never was using electricity, you wasn't was
But
using cars before, right? Always gonna affect you.
it'll
Yeah,
affect you
but
by
no
the goods
matter.
you need. Yes, even if you don't have
You need
electricity, you
basic
still
goods,
have
you
to
still
eat.
need
You
basic
still have
goods.
to drink.
You still
Yeah.
need basic goods, and these
Yeah, you
basic
need
goods have
basic
to be
needs.
manufactured.
That's the
And from the
thing.
manufacturing base, you're gonna need fuel to support these industries that are producing these basic goods that people need.
Mhm.
So we see from an Pan African standpoint, this reveals Africa's economic stability is still vulnerable to conflicts far outside of the continent.
Mhm.
But while that might be a negative in that sense, there could be a spin off because a lot of these ships and logistics will be changing route and they will be moving through Cape Verde
Mhm.
towards South Africa that side, which is a longer route. So they're gonna feel that cost as well. And they will pass that cost on to the consumers because it becomes so risky for them to travel through the Strait of Hormuz.
Mhm.
See? So nobody wants to take that risk. And the insurers don't want to insure them for that purpose. And the fact that their route is changed, all of this will disturb and disrupt the whole logistics of the shipping companies and moving goods and services across the global south and Africa. See? So we want to move on to the next thing, which Bingy really touch on really. The supply chain distributions and the trade delays that this may cause because a lot of countries probably place their orders already waiting on supplies to arrive and not only the current supply is going to be disturbed, the future ones is also going to be disturbed. The war has also disrupted major global trade route. Shipping company has reduced or suspended travel through the critical waterways, forcing the vessels to take longer routes.
Yeah.
What are the implications of these? What implication this will have since they are gonna be traversing these longer routes?
You're talking about a financial impact, a great financial impact, right? But not only that, now you have you taking a longer route, which means financially you're going to be spending more money to transport the same goods, right? But not only that, you'll also have a shortage of goods being transported, and the amount of vessels moving to transport these goods. So the logistical disruption that you're gonna see happening because of all this war and fighting is gonna trickle down to the consumer. Whether you live in the north or south, the global north or global south is gonna trickle down to you. But African people specifically, because we are talking about developing countries with already devalued money, they're the ones gonna feel it the most.
Yes, I. No doubt, and the ordinary people is the one who always feel it in the end. You have
Mhm.
anything to say on that, Okabongo?
Yeah, man. As I say, poor people always feel it. And one thing I'm sure about, with Africa and the lack of food security is gonna suffer because I
Mhm.
mean, the, when food gets expensive or food cannot move from one place to another place, you know, because of costs or because of it just can't move because the war is going
Mhm.
on.
And them already have a food shortage already.
And
Already.
Africa, was already facing a food shortage.
Mhm.
Which is by design. We have to add in that because And when we talk about Africa, this is what we talk about. Oh, how could a war in the Middle East affect Africa food in Africa when Africa is like the second biggest continent, with everything there, and a war in the Middle East affect food in Africa. These are the things that Africa need to change about Africa,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
everything
We
is
will
there. So go on, Yaga.
we will explore some of these issues when we look at the way forward and what Africa can do to alleviate some of these shocks and some of these issues that it has been experiencing over the last 400 years or so. So these are not really new phenomenon that Africa is experiencing. We just have to brace ourselves and take the bold step and defend our own security in terms of food. And in terms of food production, them need fertilizer. We produce some fertilizer, but we don't produce enough fertilizer. Most of the fertilizer move through these regions as well, through the Strait of Hormuz, will be definitely affected by the war that is going on, which is gonna put a pressure from on food production and food security, and obviously it's gonna increase the transportation cost. That will have to be passed on to the consumer. So these Middle Eastern routes that experience these volatility from time to time, we see these shocks again coming on to Africa. How the guy them view this scenario, view this situation where we're not only dependent on fuel, but we are also dependent on products and byproducts from the fuel and the crude oil as well, such as fertilizer.
For some reason, I don't hear the second thing you say, Yaga. You say fuel and what?
Petrochemical products, food and
And so,
fertilizer for agriculture, because it's coming from crude as well.
Okay.
A lot of the fertilizer come from crude and some come from other products. But in essence, it's gonna put a hike on fertilizer price and probably shortage as well.
Yeah. We all know that when there is war, and it could be war anywhere at all, oil prices go up, everything prices go up. And the countries with more money and with more resources, they hoard these things. So once the oil start go up, richer countries start hoarding the oil and make it even more expensive for smaller countries to get country. And then because oil go up, the food prices go up. And everything else go up, and everything else becomes scarce because, as I said, the richer countries, they start hoarding these things. They start, gathering everything just in case they can't get it no more. You know what I mean?
mhm, mhm.
And no, there's a shortage for smaller countries.
So
Unfortunately,
so
Africa is
in
covered with
essence,
smaller countries.
it's probably a part of the strategy because money have to make. And food have
Yeah.
to eat and people make money out of the war, even though it is a war.
But here's the thing: for African country, there's a real currency and debt vulnerability, right? Because their money too is being affected by war, you know. Remember, when war is being fought, for example, if you look at the dollar right now, the dollar is strengthening, right? Because and the reason why the dollar is strengthening is because America invaded or unjustly attacked another country, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
money is increasing in its value because they know after war, these are the people who naturally benefit. It's a future investment, you know. Think about it, you know, war is a
Mm.
future investment, but we're not thinking about it being a future investment. But those finances, that's how they always see it. So now the dollar going up, guess what happens to African currency? It devaluing, right? Because now you have to spend more money for $1, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
still trading in dollar. So the debt and currency devaluation, that too becomes a big issue for African countries. This thing
And
has this
increase
ripple effect across the entire economy, every single part of it.
So it affect the
and
whole world economy.
Oh, the
yeah man,
whole
increase
world.
the pressure.
Except those that are the aggressors
No, 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 no.
benefit the
It
most.
affect them, but we're
Yes,
talking about negative and positive. So it
yes,
affect them positively and it affect
but
the rest
yes,
in a
the rest
negative way.
negatively.
So there's effect right
Absolutely.
across the board.
But a dread effect.
Yeah,
Especially if you are a developing country. Think about this. If you're a developing country, you're an African country right now, you are already in debt. That means if your money decreased, your debt value went up, because you're
yeah,
spending more money to pay off the same debt.
yeah.
The increased pressure
Yes,
on the
I.
economy.
Yeah, it's a dread. And listen, you keep seeing these things about war crimes and war crimes. Again, I'll always say this: war is the crime. There is no such thing as war crimes. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
War in
No,
itself is a
war is a
crime.
crime.
Yeah, war in
No
itself
winners
is a
in
crime.
war. There are
Yes,
no
sir.
winners in war.
No, no, that is the crime.
Rasta, some countries in Africa, like Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, and Libya, are oil producing nations. So you would think that these countries would benefit from the
Hmm.
high price that is created by the conflict as suppliers and buyers try to find different partners so that they can keep the supply of oil going. But some analysts warn that Africa still might come out the loser in a this, even though them have countries that produce
Hmm.
oil, because
Hmm.
these contracts are long-term contracts. And in addition to the internal challenges that they have, some of them have got production limits where they cannot increase the production
Hmm.
because the production, as you know, is controlled by OPEC and the
Okay.
OPEC plus countries. And some of these
Mm.
countries are currently in the quagmire that we are experiencing right about now. So
Hmm.
even though we say that Africa still may not benefit from that, how do I them view that situation there?
So you're saying that even though there's gonna be a shortage of oil, and Nigeria cannot produce more oil to to
Meet the
offset that
shortfall.
to mm, and that's
Because
crazy.
there are quotas, and for that to be increased, OPEC will have to meet, and they will have
They agree.
an OPEC plus and have an agreement on what is going on, and within the geopolitical context that we see that is going on now, where even in Europe they've cut off Russian gas, and most of the gas that they were receiving at the moment come through the Strait of Hormuz. So even them will experience this as well. But we cannot fill that gap. We cannot fill that void because of these limitations that we experience as oil producing countries on the continent.
Hmm.
And this is why we call for African unity, because most of this oil that is produced in Africa go is end up outside of Africa, because Africa is not developed in a way where we are using the amount of oil that um they are producing now. Because as I said earlier, 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. And I'm just mentioning electricity because we're talking about factories use oil. You know what I mean? For producing, making cars, making anything at all, manufacture, in the industry, you know what I mean?
Transportation.
It's non-existent. You know what I mean? In Africa, and that's what you would want oil to use in, right? So if Africa was developed in a way, these countries wouldn't have to be worrying about a quota sending oil outside of Africa, and Africa could depend on itself to, you know what I mean, to produce the oil for whatever they are making.
And
Yeah.
neighboring countries could benefit from that also.
Mm.
Yeah,
But I wanna say this, and we'll use Nigeria as the example again, right? Remember, when we say these are oil producing countries, we must be clear that these countries are producing oil based on joint ventures with Chevron, ExxonMobil, Shell. Remember, these countries are not actually producing oil on their own. What they have is major stake in the oil production. So again, when do Africans actually own and operate their own oil factories, refineries? And that is what we have to consider. All these, and Nigeria, for example, as the perfect example, is Chevron and Shell and all these
Mm-hmm.
companies in Nigeria doing joint ventures in oil production and minerals. So they don't have total control. That's why you see this happening. Still, the outside entity is still controlling. Imagine your national, what they call it, National Petroleum Limited, for example, in Nigeria. Here the name is a national petroleum limited company. Is Shell and Chevron still participating as the joint partners? So
So
how come?
basically, Nigeria doesn't have any power over how many oil they produce
No, they do
or
And
where
not.
the
we,
oil
And
and
that
goes.
we
is
could,
the problem. The problem is no African state right now has full control of their oil production. That is the problem. So even though we say, hey, listen, why they ain't doing this or that? They cannot. They cannot.
It's
and
a
I
terrible,
mean,
it's a terrible thing.
the, the,
Yeah.
the black print, the black print is there. We keep talking about the black print that we see in the Sahel states where they are taking steps and moving forward to control their sovereignty in every aspect and looking for partnerships that are equitable and beneficial to the people of the Sahel states. So we need our African brothers and sisters who are leaders of the country to look at these models and realize that at this difficult time, as African countries and Pan Africanists, we have to find strategies to move towards strategic independence in protecting our sovereignty because we can't be producing it and not adding value to the crude oil that we are producing in the sense that we are refining the oil within the country, making all those spill-off that come from the oil that we use in the country because all of these things have to be imported.
Mm.
That is why it is viewed that Africa does not come out as a winner in this situation because even though these countries are producing the crude, it is leaving the country. No refining is taking place there. And they have to start taking steps to
Well,
make sure that these products are refined in the country and they add value to the product.
yeah, that would take total nationalization, meaning, for example, when you say your country is the National Petroleum Limited company,
Mm-hmm.
that means the country owns the entire operation from drilling to exporting to refining. That does not happen. Until that happens, what are you talking about? It is impossible. It means there'll have to be no more Shell in the operation, no more
Mm-hmm.
Chevron, no more Exxon Mobil in the operation. That's what that would mean. It would mean that
And
the governments
uh,
have come up with a way to actually nationalize
nationalize the oil.
the industry.
Because and even if I think they could be there, but they're in a capacity just to serve
Right.
the national company, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause
yeah, but
I
even
think
now,
that's what
think
Russia
about this,
have.
you know.
Russia.
The country normally has the higher stake, right? They have the
Mm,
controlling stake, right? And yet with that controlling stake in the operations, you still cannot make decisions that we're talking about, you know. Why
because
All
is
the
that?
time,
Bingy, I know that like in Russia, you have the shells and the chevron them operate in Russia, but Russia
Same way.
have control over it. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to see a thing like that in a Nigeria or Angola.
Equitable arrangement, but they
Yeah,
don't have
yeah,
an
where
equitable arrangement.
they drill the oil, but the nation have control over the oil. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And where the oil goes to.
Of
That's a
course.
big issue, you know.
The
Hmm.
partnership has to be mutually
Right.
beneficial. You can't be getting more than me, the producer, who is producing it. There's no way we can go anywhere in the world and do that. No country in
Hmm.
Africa can do that. So that have to stop. It have to stop. It cannot continue. And like we said, the black print is there. They just need to look at the black print from the Sahel state and start looking at models that benefits the people. Even if it means that we have to remove some of these military bases that exist there because they are a threat to our sovereignty and our national resources, as well as we can see that they don't really offer the sort of security as they claim to offer. So we need to take those bold steps like we see in the Sahel state and make the thing more mutually beneficial, man. It can't be a case where you have a parasitic relationship all the time. That not gonna work. You kill out the people.
Sometimes you see these military base and you wonder what they're there for. Because first thing, you know what I mean, they didn't stop anything. So like why are they there? Did they help in a previous war? Did they stop something? Did they prevent something before you can say, okay, you know what I mean, they are needed there. They just set up these bases in this country for no reason. They don't stop anything. The country is still going through turmoil.
And whatever they go there to stop gets worse.
Get
Mhm.
so obviously that's not what they're there for.
Right.
Because we know that their military is efficient and they talk about it, oh, military is so efficient. We go into Venezuela and you know what I mean, in and out. Quick, you know what I mean? And they do what they went to do. So they
Quick
can
and
do it.
fast.
Yeah,
Quick and
they
fast.
can do it. But I mean they don't want to do it.
Mm.
Obviously. Obviously. So
I think you know, for Africa, the challenge is really how do African countries and Africa as a continent break these cycles that have been going on for centuries. Now, sometimes it's easy said than done, but
yeah.
there must be a way where you start towards working towards having real independence, true independence, having control of your resources. How does that really happen? And that is always going to be the challenge for Africa because to the end of the day, African peoples are the people who suffer on this earth the most. And yet they have the most resources on the earth.
Yeah.
That's the irony of it all.
But
How do African people have the most resources on the earth and yet suffer the most?
Binge, you talk about a while ago to nationalize, like African country need to nationalize the crude oil or the oil
Mhm.
companies. But we see like countries like Venezuela, that's what they were trying to do. That's what they did. And we
Mhm.
see they become that instant enemy of America. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And any
Mhm.
country
Not
that
an
do that,
instant enemy. They've always been an enemy since them take away the American Isle, as the boss said.
Right.
then take away the oil because that's what they
Yeah.
claim it as. When they
Right.
nationalize their own oil,
Mhm.
you know what I mean, they become an
Yeah.
enemy. You know what I
How
Yeah.
mean?
can they take away something that is yours?
Yeah.
So it's hard. You're saying it's hard.
Yeah. So I'm saying like a African country maybe don't want to be a Venezuela, just like how we were
Right.
talking about yesterday. A little Caribbean country don't want to be a Cuba. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And understood, we understand that, but for African countries, they really don't have a whole lot to lose because
Hey,
they're not in control of nothing. So why not fight for something?
what are you gonna lose, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
fight for
because
something.
this this highlights, the dependence on imported energy and the reliance on external trade route and the fact that them have limited control over the financial system. It means that we have to pivot. We have to pivot and find trading partners that are trustworthy and we can rely on them in a mutually benefit beneficial manner. And we try to have reason about Africa all the time. And all the time we talk about Russia. All the time we have to involve China because we see these countries are putting up resistance to the
Mm-hmm.
rules-based order. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
out of that came the BRICS. And you see a lot of countries that started forming alliance with BRICS, which is an economic bloc that is offering the same type of loans with less restrictions and offering developmental loan for these countries. So even though we don't want to do this and we are reliant, we have to look at different trade partners and we should be able to look at these trade partners without the threat or sanctions or tariff that other countries are experiencing.
And one thing that you got, the reason why we always bring up a Russia, a China, even a Iran, these are countries that, break away from the from under the heels of the United States and their rule because we haven't seen a country yet progress by following the rules of the West. All the countries that have some kind of progression or I can't find the right word, but a country like China who rise up, we see rise up, creating their own path to success. Not following all the West say it should be done. So we have to look at these countries who did it, and we haven't seen yet a country who following the rules of the West who rise up. So that's why we as Africans have to look at those countries and say, okay, this is the path to go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then we talk about the rules-based system all the time, right? But I think we missing a point. It is a unjust rule-based system. It only benefits those that are in power and those that have been in power. Because whenever they're ready, they break those rules without consequence. So it is an unjust rule-based system. But when we look at what's happening and people need to be sit down and be clear, be unbiased. The same countries that have dominated the world from industrialization till now are the same countries that keep on benefiting, right? The same developed countries. It doesn't change from slavery to now, from trading human trafficking of African people till now, are the same countries. The global south is the same countries in the global south. They still
And
call
these
them
are some of the
developing.
crimes. These are some
So
of the crimes that they're accusing Iran of that they themselves are complicit in. Who is
yeah,
gonna hold them responsible?
that becomes the question. When does this change? When does the tide shift? Right? Because we sitting here for centuries and it's the same countries are the same offenders all the time. All the
Mm.
time.
And
When
and
does
We
the
are
that
saying,
change?
and the system is created to keep them in power at all times.
Yes, I.
And that's why we
then
have to
that is
go
why we
on.
see this flare up now, That is why this conflict is in place now because it is right playing out in the geopolitics of what is happening. And they knew what the consequences were gonna be
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't hiding what the consequences were gonna be. But as usual, them don't care about any of these economies apart from themselves. And
But
them think it would have been so quick and fast.
now you have to remember, there is money to be made in war, because there are
Mm-hmm.
companies that made these equipments for war.
Mm-hmm.
There are companies that there's big money to be made in war, and these are friends with the elite. These are the elite and friends with the government, and so they work together. You cannot be making bombs and not using them.
Right.
Yeah, because you need to
Right.
make more. You can't make them and just put them down. You need to use them.
New
So more can
technology
make, yeah. So they need to be
replace the
used.
old ones, them.
You
Mm-hmm.
think somebody make a bomb for $20 million to just sit down and that's it? It has to
Yeah.
be paid for. You know what I mean? This has to be paid for, you know. One bomb
It's
costs
it's
$20 million. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is
it's the
getting rich
sort
off the
of
war.
thing. It's the sort of thing we're seeing happening with a lot of manufactured goods now. It
Yeah.
is not made to last
Mm-hmm.
because money has to be made. I
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
mean, from a Pan African perspective, the lesson is clear that Africa must strengthen its economic sovereignty through regional energy cooperation, industrialization, agriculture independence, and stronger intra trade between the continent and global south countries in the diaspora. Only
Uh-uh.
by self-sustaining system can Africa be truly liberated and reduce itself to this exposure that is experiencing year in, year out for over 400 years now. So we don't want the people them to be focusing on what is going on because these things are a distraction. We know it is a big distraction for the PDF files because just
Mm.
over a week ago, the PDF files was the biggest thing on the agenda, on the news, and we have seen the fallout that it has been having across countries like Norway, the UK, and other countries. And we don't see the sort of uproar in US as yet. And this plays directly into that.
I'm not even sure if they care like that. Because people that say they are connected, but I'm not sure they care. That I don't think they care. They don't care much about those things. I mean, and these things of like the Epstein thing. It's things that have been going on a long time. People know about these things, but nothing has been done to stop those things. I don't think they care about these things enough. You know what I mean? So these people, as I said, the war, money, Epstein file or no Epstein file, they need money is there to be made. You know what I mean? They have their own they have their agendas to start the war. You know what I mean? So they're gonna do it no matter what. Cause that's the agenda. This place has been like, I mean, they talk about black and black crime. They talk about, you know what I mean, the Muslim or what and whatever the Muslims doing in the country and whatever. But you hardly hear about white pedophilia, white sex offenders. You don't really hear about these things. And it's been a plague in American society where, you know what I mean, white men is the biggest sex offender in the country. White men are involved in pedophilia, and it's like sweeping on the rug. This has been going on for forever.
And this is just probably one of the ring, them break up.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's just one. It's because they're so famous, and you know what I mean, and it come out, but it didn't stop. I'm saying they know about these things. It's been going on for a long time. You know what I mean? Remember, you know,
And it's only one person
we know
being
about
convicted so far.
like with the Catholic priests and stuff like that. These things have been going on for a long time. A Catholic priest get accused of doing these things. They move him from one church to the next church.
Parish, from one parish
These things just get
or
swept under the rug
diocese.
and then they act like it's not, you know, it's not a big deal. Pedophilia and sex
Pastor,
offense is not a big deal in America
Bingi, your
because
final thoughts?
My final thoughts is in the world that we're living in now and for some centuries now, there's an injustice going on. And the focus is never on human development. African people especially have to figure out a way how they can control their resources, how they can control their destiny, how they can move forward in this whole arena that we call the world. And the world is a construct of men, right? So they have to figure out how to navigate this where they, the African people, can benefit from all of it. So far, we have not seen Africa being able to develop. And that's what we need. We need leaders to be leaders. We need innovation to flourish in Africa. We need them to take control of all the resources. We need revolution. We need solidarity. That's what we need. For us to progress as a people, for Africa to move forward, they need true revolution. And when we say revolution, we don't mean only revolution of going into war. We mean revolution of the mind. They need
That's what we
revolution
need.
of the
That's
mind.
what we need. We don't need no more
And once
wars.
they have revolution of the mind, things can change. We need that, but we need solidarity. We have to, that's the only way we can move forward and stop having these type of conversations. What happens to Africa because somebody else is doing something that has nothing to do with
To do with
African
us.
people?
Rasta, we've come to the end of another perfect balance Trodclass. Okavanga, you wanna have a final word, or we can wrap it up,
We
you know,
need
because
African unity. We need African unity, and we want begin that African unity with a borderless Africa.
Mhm.
We need a borderless Africa so things can move in Africa freely, and Africans can move in Africa freely. A strong Africa. We need a strong Africa so African people abroad can look at Africa and say, this is somewhere where I want to go. I want to go back to. Where I want to go, where I want to raise my family. We need Africa to go to that place because this is the thing with an Indian in in a foreign country can say, you know what? I'm going back to India. You know what I mean? A Chinese in a foreign country can say, you know what? I'm going back to China. You're hardly going to ever see that Africans seem to be running away from Africa. We need Africa to become a place where it's always home. So if a foreign country doesn't work out, hey, we are going back home. You know what I mean?
it's
And this will
funny.
happen through African unity. Go on, again.
It's funny how you said that, you know. My reason with a region the other day, you know, some bridging in a region, you know, and they will look for evacuate and make them escape, figure a yard. But they will look at roots, figure a yard. They will look at Europe, Turkey, all these other places. And not one person, the virgin say come up with an idea to say, yo, make we go to Africa.
Yeah.
And Africa is closer than most of the places what them talk about. So in our mind, we have to be free, and in our mind, we have to embrace our identity and realize that Africa, despite what it is experiencing now, despite what it is going through now, we cannot erase that out of our DNA. So we have to spare a thought for that. And if we not help to build that up and make it a reality, it's not gonna happen because you see, the down presser has been down pressing us for over 400 years now. We have to say big up that any which art him there. Everything up. Go and big up yourself. You don't know. Even though you're not here physically, we know your spirit is still here with I and I. As we can see, the war involving Iran is not just a Middle East conflict. It is a global economic and geopolitical shock. And Africa is inevitable caught in its wake. For Pan Africans, thinkers like I and people who think about Africa, because we want to make Africa great again. The key question is not only how Africa will survive these shocks, but how the continent can transform them into catalysts for greater unity, independence, and strategic power. Perfect balance.
Yes,
Please
sir.
remember to like, share, and subscribe if you like the reasoning. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. Just help the channel to grow because you know, so the algorithm work. Big up yourself for all of the people them who tune in and all of the people them who subscribe to the channel.
That is it, man.
Yeah, man. Over and out. You can't stop it to Kovango.
No, sir. You know, kata bingi?
Mm. No.
Let me see if I can do it. Yeah.
Kaya alone na yaga.
Yeah. I'll go refresh it. Yeah, man. That is it, you know?
Like na one left.
No question, no comment,
Good man.
no reasoning.
My Philip up say any.
Yeah, guys
Yeah,
still running though.
yeah, may I find it? Yeah, may I find it, you know?